The dollar won, but might the US lose control of the dollar? We have a world currency already, it's the dollar. Do we want to keep it that way? The dominance of the US dollar is hard to overstate at the moment. It's not just that the US economy is on a roll. The US dollar is the preferred choice for international business transactions at a level that's even larger than the US economic position. This is an excerpt from the Node newsletter, a daily roundup of the most pivotal crypto news on CoinDesk and beyond. You can subscribe to get the full newsletter here. To put these two in perspective, the US economy represents about 25% of global output, a level that has been stable for over 40 years, an astonishing achievement when you consider the rapid growth achieved in China, parts of Asia, and Eastern Europe. When it comes to global finance, though, the dollar is even more dominant than the US economy. The Bank of International Settlements estimates that the US dollar is used in 90% of all international payments and settlements, with 40% of all trade invoiced in US dollars. In the world of blockchain stablecoins, the US dollar represents 99% of all global stablecoin transactions. Astonishing, the leading players, are both USD-backed and based on Ethereum. All these US dollar transactions put much of the world's financial infrastructure within reach of US regulators. Most of these US dollars are electronic, and consequently they all have ties back to US banks and in turn, eventually, US regulators and the US Federal Reserve. The extraterritorial nature of US law and the reach of US institutions and digital networks makes it very difficult to transact in dollars without encountering US regulations. There's always cash, but the largest bill printed by the US Treasury today is $100. That will get you dinner in New York for one no wine. Imagine how many of them you'll need to cover the cost of that new aircraft carrier. For any substantial funding requirements, you need digital payments. This dollar dominance gives the US considerable power in the global markets, especially when it comes to sanctions against individuals and governments. Banks, wary of being cut off from 90% of all global payments, are going to follow US directives whether they are binding or not. Other countries have tried to supplant the dollar, largely without success. There is, however, a new option that exists: synthetic dollars on a blockchain. Synthetic dollars are dollar-denominated stablecoins that contain no dollars. Instead, they are digital tokens that are pegged to the US dollar in value but backed by a mix of other real and digital assets and managed by an algorithm to maintain a peg with the US dollar. In the world of blockchain, they are known as algorithmic stablecoins. Algorithmic stablecoins aren't perfect, and they aren't risk-free. Because they are dollar-denominated but often don't consist of dollars, they can lose their peg with the US dollar. Sometimes this happens because of fraud, but it can also happen when the underlying assets change rapidly in value. In periods of high market turmoil and uncertainty, this happens. Synthetic dollars, in effect, can cost more than real dollars because you need to overcapitalize your collateral in order to avoid the risk of losing that alignment with the US dollar. Despite these risks, quite a few blockchain-based digital assets have been established with a peg to the US dollar. The DAI from MakerDAO is probably the most successful of these, though its backing today includes some US dollar assets. There are others, however, that are pegged purely based on cryptocurrencies and other digital assets that do not connect with the dollar. See also crypto's transition. Bringing capital onshore. Opinion. Widespread availability of these assets could alter the regulatory landscape for individuals, companies, and governments, allowing them to transact in the world standard currency of choice while remaining outside the US regulatory structure. This would be particularly useful when those people want to move money across borders or buy goods that are globally priced in US dollars, such as oil. Not everyone really wants a synthetic stablecoin. Their share of the market is relatively small compared to stablecoins that are wholly or partially backed with US dollar-denominated assets. When it comes to risk and cost, a US dollar stablecoin that is backed with US dollars or US dollar-denominated assets like US Treasury bonds by far the lowest risk option. It's clear that many users prefer this to other choices for that reason. The implications for US policy are significant. Widespread adoption of these assets could diminish the power of sanctions and the reach of US regulatory structures. To head off that risk, perhaps the simplest strategy for the US is to speed up the approval and regulatory integration of existing US dollar-backed stablecoins. The US dollar is more than just a currency. It's a strategic asset for the United States and a global symbol of our national resiliency and economic power that's worth protecting.